All right, hi girls. This is your test review for chapters 9 and 10. Your test on Rome and the Etruscans is this Wednesday. So I'm going to review a little bit of chapter 9 and then we're going to jump into chapter 10 and I'll cover whatever I didn't get to in class and try to emphasize some important stuff that you definitely need to go over for the test. But don't forget to review the reading, because there is some questions in the test that you will only know the answer to if you've done the reading. Play the Jeopardy and review your notes, of course. Okay, so Italy before the Romans. We're in the area of Tuscany, like central Italy. The height of this civilization is the 7th through the 6th centuries BCE. There aren't a ton of questions from this chapter, but just try to think of the couple of the important things that we talked about, like overarching themes from Etruscan art. We talked about how men and women were pretty much equal in this civilization. We see a lot of celebrating in their wall paintings and in their tombs. They were very skilled with metalworking, so we looked at the golden fibula. They were also skilled with bronze. We see some bronze sculptures coming from this civilization too. So remember we looked at this temple and we talked about differences between Greek temples, Etruscan temples, and Roman temples. So think back to all of that. What did we talk about? Okay. Why are there no surviving Etruscan temples today? Why are they, pretty much gone? Okay, hopefully you're recalling the materials they're made of, which is wood and mud brick. So the columns would have been unfluted Doric wooden columns. The rest of the temple would have been made with mud brick. And then how about the sculpture? Okay, hopefully you're recalling that it's terracotta, life-size sculptures on the roof of the temple rather than in the pediment. Okay, so in Greek and Roman temples, you would have seen the sculpture in the pediment. Okay, also don't forget about the stairs and the fact that the columns in the Etruscan temple are only on the porch, whereas in a Greek temple, they would have gone all the way around the perimeter of the temple. Okay, and this is the Temple of Herod too, so you can compare them. Okay, lots of differences going on there. Quickly wanted to take a look at this guy. So compare him to some of the archaic Greek sculptures that we looked at. How is he different? Hopefully you're pointing out that he's in motion. He is striding forward. But there are a lot of similarities, especially with the long hair, the archaic smile, okay? But hopefully you're noticing that the other differences we can point out are that he's made of painted terracotta and he's clothed, whereas all of the archaic chorai, remember that word, choros, chore, were nude, okay? And this is the last slide I'm going to look at for chapter 9. Just remember what we talked about in class about their religion and how they believed in many gods, just as the Greeks did. And what is unique about this sarcophagus? What is unique about this pose? Okay, we talked about it in class, so hopefully you're remembering our conversation about how men and women are seen as equals. They're affectionate, they're very natural looking, all right? And so this kind of pose would have been very shocking to the Greeks seeing this type of thing. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up for chapter 9. I'm going to move on to chapter 10. Okay, and here we are in Rome. Not going to review too much about the history of Rome since we already talked about it in class. If you have time and if you're interested in ancient Rome, you should watch some of the videos that I've embedded into this PowerPoint. There's one from the BBC that's really good. It's about an hour long, so there's no way we have time to watch it in class. But if you have time on your own, it really tells you a lot about the history of ancient Rome, which will help you understand the artwork a lot better. So I encourage you to do that. But anyway, the Roman Empire was gigantic. At its height, it contained, more than 60 million people. So very powerful empire. And what the main themes here, because we always have main themes that we need to keep in mind, are that Roman art was all about propaganda. It was commissioned mostly from emperors who were interested in spreading their likeness throughout the Empire of Rome, so that people would know who they were, and because they wanted to put this image of power and authority all over the streets of Rome. Most of the portraits we see in Roman art are likenesses of the people they were depicting, whereas in Greece, almost all portraits were idealized. So that's really the big difference we're dealing with here. The Romans were also known for a lot of technological advances. They invented the aqueduct. So remember the reasons why they had to do that. They invent concrete and all of the wonderful architectural advances they're able to make just by using that material. Okay. And what else? We see coins. They are using a system of currency, and which emperor put his likeness on the coin. Hopefully you can remember. So they, have a lot of technologies that they are coming up with, and one of the main things is architecture. So think about all of the buildings we looked at and how they were able to be created with this newfound material of concrete, okay? All right, so I'm really skipping around here because, there's over 100 slides and I only have a couple minutes left, but I wanted to go to this slide because I know there's a couple questions on your test about this one, and we didn't spend too much time on it in class. So what I want you to think about is how the sculptor has created the illusion of movement and how the sculptor has created the illusion of space. All right? So really think about that and really look at what's going on here. We did briefly talk about it in class. Note that it's on the Arch of Titus. Showed you a bunch of different arches, okay? Which, by the way, is another Roman innovation that I forgot to mention. Okay. Why did emperors commission these arches? What were they used for? All right. Do you remember me comparing them to a modern day billboard that you would see on the highway? They're very similar. They're advertising all of the successes of these Roman emperors, and this is no different. This is celebrating the the victory of this battle from Jerusalem. The Roman soldiers carrying back spoils from the war. All right, they have this big menorah. Okay, they're pressing forward. Notice how deep the carving is. You have a lot of shadowy areas here. Some of the figures are protruding from the background. This is known as high relief. So that's helping to add to this illusion of space and illusion of movement. You have a lot of overlapping going on. Look at how some of the heads are protruding a lot while some of them are more shallow. All right, so this is called low relief. Also note that way up here is another arch, an arch on top of an arch, kind of crazy, and they are pressing toward the arch, and at some point it seems as though they'll be walking through the arch. So think about how the artist has created the illusion of space and movement here. I wanted to go back to this temple quickly. This is an old Roman temple. What kind of columns do you see, first of all? Freestanding Corinthian columns on the porch. And then how about back here? Hopefully you said engaged Corinthian columns, which would make this a pseudo-peripteral temple. Okay. Um, I wanted to go back to this because this temple, I'm not sure if it says it in the PowerPoint or not, but this temple influenced Thomas Jefferson, okay, the former president of the United States, and influenced his architecture a lot. So that's something to make note of, that he was influenced by the Maison Carrier, which is now in modern day Nimes, France. So we need to talk more about emperors and how they wanted to be depicted in portraiture. So here is a portrait of Marcus Aurelius, who we didn't talk about in class, but he was a very influential Roman emperor, and this is kind of a break from what we've looked at before, in that first of all, it's an equestrian portrait, which we haven't seen any of the previous emperors on horseback, but it's also hieratic scale. I mean, if you look closely, you can see that his foot is very close to the ground. So he's depicted much larger than he actually should be. So again, going with this theme of power and authority, maybe wanting to seem larger than life, you have the typical pose that the emperors would have had, their extended arm addressing the crowds of Rome. Okay, so a very powerful, authoritative image of this emperor. Okay, superhuman grandeur is what it says in the slide. So, perfect example of that. In contrast, we can take a look at this image of the same emperor, Marcus Aurelius. Again, this is from a relief, but he's portrayed very differently here. You can see lines in his forehead. His eyes look, very worrisome. So this may reflect what is going on at the time. We see a lot more wars happening in Rome, and the beginning of the fall of Rome is happening. So that again is portrayed in the artwork. Okay, if we move on, there's a lot of really cool sarcophagi to look at. I'm not going to spend too much time looking at them, but you can see that they get very, very detailed. And there's one later on that has a ton of figures in it. Yeah, look at how much motion is going on here. The figures are kind of all jumbled into the same space. So it's very different from the sarcophagi that we looked at in chapter 9. I'm not sure if we looked at this or not, but this is Caracalla. We looked at the baths of Caracalla, and I talked to you a little bit about how Caracalla was kind of a jerk. He killed his own brother and then had his brother's likeness removed from every artwork in Rome. And here's an example. This is where his brother's image was. It was once painted there and he had it removed. But this is a good example of, again, political unrest. Caracalla knew people hated him. Maybe he knew what was going to come, because he was eventually assassinated. So again, you can see worry in his face and this very anxious look. So what you need to think about is how portraits of emperors compared to portraits of just wealthy Roman citizens. What do you think the difference might be there? How were the emperors depicted, and how were wealthy Roman citizens depicted? Well, hopefully you're thinking about the images of Augustus and Hadrian and Marcus Aurelius, and how they really sought to convey this feeling of power and authority, whereas wealthy Roman citizens just wanted their likeness to be sculpted. Remember, we talked about that term verism, which means appearing old and wise and not afraid to show wrinkles or age. Well, that's the main difference there. So I want you to remember that. You may have to discuss that on your test. And I'm almost out of time here, but I do want to give you hints for your essay. I'm going to give you a choice of two different essays that you can answer. One of them is you're going to have to compare the Arapacis Augustae with the Panathenaic Festival frieze. So you can discuss that if you wish. The other is to compare Greek and Roman sculpture. So good luck with your studying, girls, and I will see you on Wednesday.